Today, we're going to dive into two really powerful ancient stories. They're both about the fall from grace, telling the tale of celestial guardians who basically walk off the job. And in doing so, they serve as this incredible warning about power, responsibility, and what happens when things go wrong. But you gotta ask, why do these stories stick with us? I mean, whether you call them angels or watchers or keepers, this idea of a powerful protector choosing to fall, it hits on something deep, right? It's all about that line between duty and desire and the absolute chaos that happens when you cross it. So, we're going to look at two specific stories. First, the more poetic parable of the mountain lamps, and second, what we'll call the Grand Library allegory, which is really a fantastic metaphor for the ancient story of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch. They tell almost the exact same story, just through totally different lenses. All right, so to really get the tragedy of the fall, you first have to understand just how high up they were to begin with. Before all the chaos, there was this state of perfect divine order. This was a time when these guardians had one single sacred purpose. You could call it a state of grace. So let's meet our guardians. In one story, we have the Bright Keepers. Think of them as beings made of pure light. Their whole job was to tend these silver lamps on a high, frozen mountain, providing a guiding light for the world below. Then you've got the librarians, or the watchers. They're called the wakeful ones, and their job was to tend to the shelves of humanity, watching over us from a cosmic library. In both cases, they're meant to be completely detached protectors. And their job description, well, it pretty much boiled down to these four things. They had to be vigilant, but from way, way up there. Absolute separation and strict non-interference. Look, these weren't just friendly suggestions. These were the fundamental rules holding the cosmos together. Their obedience had to be perfect. That was the whole deal. And here we go. This is the moment it all goes wrong. The pivot point. It's about a conscious choice to just shatter that balance, to abandon their post and come down into the mortal world. This is where everything starts to unravel. So what made them do it? Well, this is where the stories seem a little different, at least on the surface. The Bright Keepers, they were just lonely. They felt cold, and they looked down and saw the warmth of human fires and just wanted to be part of it. The Watchers, though, theirs was a much more direct, earthly desire. They were captivated by human women. But see the common thread? In both cases, they traded their high divine duty for a very real, very tangible earthly connection. And let's be crystal clear. This was not some slip-up. This wasn't an accident. In the story of the Watchers, their leader, Samyaza, knew exactly how bad this was. So much so that he made the other 200 guardians swear a binding oath together. This was a planned, deliberate, collective rebellion. So what happens when you take something divine, something pure, and you rip it out of its original context? Well, it gets corrupted. It becomes a curse. The very gifts these guardians brought down to earth became the tools that would ruin everything. The story of the mountain lamps shows this perfectly. The keepers had this thing called the flame of truth, a pure, cool light meant only for guidance. But when they brought that flame down to earth to try and get in good with the mortals, that same flame was twisted into the forge of ambition. Suddenly, it wasn't for guidance anymore. It was for making weapons, for gaining power. It's an incredible metaphor for how a good thing can be turned toxic when its purpose is perverted. And this is where the parallels get chillingly specific. The parable talks about them sharpening stones into swords, while the Book of Enoch names the guy who did it, a fallen angel named Azazel, who taught humanity how to make swords and shields. The parable mentions brewing potions. Enoch says their leader, Samyaza, taught sorcery and root cutting. Azazel is even said to have taught cosmetics, the arts of beautification, fueling vanity. These weren't just vague evils. They were specific, forbidden technologies unleashed on a world that was not ready for them. And the consequence of all this forbidden knowledge, all this immense power without any of the wisdom needed to handle it, it wasn't just chaos in society. No, it led to something physical, something monstrous. This unnatural union between the divine and the earthly gave birth to something terrifyingly new. Okay, so obviously a mess this big couldn't go unanswered. The final act of these stories isn't really about divine rage, though. It's about divine justice. It's about a necessary, swift action to basically hit the cosmic reset button and restore order. And those monstrous offspring? They're known as the Nephilim. The Mountain Lamp story calls them giants of greed, monsters who just consumed everything in sight, leaving nothing but conflict behind. The library version calls them giant texts, chaotic books that consumed all other knowledge. See the pattern? Their one defining feature is consumption. They are an insatiable, destructive force that just tears the world apart. And the punishments that come down, oh, they are a masterclass in poetic justice. The Bright Keepers, who used their celestial knowledge to teach humanity how to forge iron, they were bound for eternity in that very same iron. Azazel and the Watchers, who were once beings of light, they were bound and thrown into total darkness. In every case, the punishment perfectly mirrors the crime. It's all about cosmic accountability. But that only takes care of the fallen guardians. What about the giants? What about the mess they left behind? Well, for that, you need a much bigger solution. A great storm in one story, a great flood in the other. Both serve the same purpose, to completely wash the world clean of the corruption and hit reset. But even after all that, the punishment, the flood, the story isn't quite over. Because the fall left a permanent scar on the world, a theological legacy that might just be the most mind-bending part of this whole narrative. And that legacy, it tries to answer one of the biggest, oldest questions there is. Where does evil actually come from? I don't just mean people making bad choices. I mean those malevolent, destructive forces that seem to exist in the world. This story gives a very, very specific origin for them. So here's the crucial twist. When the flood destroyed the physical bodies of the giants, their spirits, which were a hybrid of celestial and human, couldn't move on. They couldn't die properly, so they were trapped here, on Earth. And these disembodied, angry, hungry spirits, according to this tradition, those are the demons. This completely reframes the human struggle. It's not just an internal battle against sin, it's a constant defense against these very real external forces of evil. And in the end, everything comes back to this one powerful moral, summed up perfectly by the final line of the Mountain Lamps parable. It just says it all, doesn't it? It's this massive warning that divine gifts, things like knowledge and power, are completely tied to responsibility. The moment you abandon your higher purpose to chase earthly ambition, that ambition is going to become your tomb. So that leaves us with this final question. Are these just ancient stories trying to make sense of evil? Or are they something more? A timeless warning about our own relationship with power and knowledge? I mean, think about it. Celestial secrets are brought down to an unprepared humanity, and what follows is weapons, vanity, and chaos. It's an ancient blueprint for what happens when our innovation outpaces our wisdom. A warning that, honestly, feels just as urgent today as it must have thousands of years ago.